A very warm welcome to all our mentees, and let me just give you a quick introduction about Mentorfy. So, Mentorfy, as you all might know, is an educational and networking platform that helps you connect, interact, and draw from the experiences of the success stories in your chosen fields. Now, I won't take much of your time. Let's introduce Dhruv. So, Dhruv is a 2020 graduate in electrical and electronics engineering from BITS Pilani Goa campus, where he ranked fifth in his branch. He appeared for GRE in June 2019 as part of his plan to pursue higher studies and achieved the elusive score of 340 on 340 in GRE, along with an 516 in analytical writing. He also scored a fantastic 117 out of 120 in TOEFL and subsequently received an admit from Georgia Tech, where he will start his MS in fall 2021 in the electrical and computer engineering department under the computer systems and software track. He has also interned at NVIDIA Graphics during his undergraduate studies. So, Dhruva, let's welcome you.
Hello, am I audible?
Hi, Dhruv. Yes, Dhruv, you're audible.
All right, so thanks for the kind word, Shreya. And without any further ado, let's just start the presentation. So we'll cover the following topics today in a brief manner. Starting off, I'll just briefly let you all know what the pattern of the GRE exam in itself is. So yeah, first off, I'll let you guys know what the brief pattern of the GRE exam is, what is the purpose of the exam in itself, and what are the various sections that are part of the exam. After that, we'll move on to what I suggest for the people who are preparing and how I would recommend they go about their preparation. After that, I'll let them know what timeline I followed for my own preparation for giving the exam, and I'll also uh, cover a different method that was followed by a few of my friends who had certain important commitments while they were preparing for GRE, something like a job or a hectic academic schedule, and how they ended up preparing for a good school. Subsequently, I'll give a brief introduction about TOEFL and how to prepare for that, along with what resources I would recommend them to use. And after TOEFL, I'll take your queries in. Yeah, let's quickly discuss the pattern of the GRE general test. So before that pattern itself, I'll let you guys know that GRE is conducted by an organization called ETS, and they conduct two different kinds of GRE tests. One is the general test, which is very relevant to us and which almost all students who are pursuing higher studies abroad will have to give at some point in time. And another is a specific GRE subject test, which is not particularly relevant to us, but I'll just let you guys know that there are two different tests so that you are not confused when you go ahead and apply for the exam. And just remember, you have to apply only for the general test unless you look at the website of your specific program in the university and they are demanding for a score from the GRE subject test. Just make sure you keep that in mind. And yeah, now that we have put that aside, we'll uh, yeah, discuss the various sections that are a part of GRE. So you will have five main sections. One of them will be analytical writing analysis. You and yeah, these sections have been placed in order of when they will occur during your actual examination. So when you enter your examination hall, the first thing that you will see on your screen will be uh, an analytical writing section, which will have two parts, which we will discuss further later on. And yeah, following your analytical writing, you will get two verbal sections and two quantitative reasoning sections, which will be alternating. So it will either be one verbal, one point, another verbal, another point, or the other way around. And along with that, most of the time, students also get another extra section, which is a research or experimental section. So the official statement that ETS gives for this is that they want to try out new questions for future examinations, or they are giving you questions from certain past examinations so that they can figure out whether different sets of questions are getting roughly similar grades for students. So yeah, after these five sections, uh, yeah, one more thing that you should know about the GRE is that it is a section-wise adaptive. So what this means very basically is that your one entire section of your GRE. So for instance, if you have started a verbal section, a section of verbal reasoning, the entire section has already been given to you. Like the 20 questions within that section are pre-decided, and you can scroll through those 20 questions whatever way you like. You want to attempt a reading comprehension first, you can do that. You want to attempt a text completion first, you can do that. This is slightly different compared to a few other examinations such as GMAT and even the past GRE, which was not section-wise adaptive. What you would have for that would be a question-wise adaptive test. And how that would work is you are not allowed to scroll between questions. The question that is on your screen is the question that you have to solve right. So now this what I've discussed right now is the section-wise part. When I say adaptive, what that means is that your responses to this particular, the current section that you are attempting will impact the next section that you receive. So for instance, you perform very well in your first quantitative reasoning section. Your second quantitative reasoning section will be relatively more difficult compared to what you would have otherwise if your performance was not very good, for instance. So now, because of the relative difficulty of the second quantitative reasoning section that you got, your scores will also slightly be higher. So for instance, in the second quant section out of 20 questions, if you only get 16 correct, but it was a difficult quant section, you will get a slightly more, 1 or 2 points more as compared to if you would have gotten 16 correct in a relatively easier quant section. Yeah. So now that we're done with the section as adaptive part, if you have any confusions, you can just put it into the chat and let me know, and I'll try to answer it. And yeah. So the part that we discussed right now is what you do during the test when you're giving an exam. And now after the exam, immediately after the exam, you will be given a tentative score that you have achieved in the exam on your screen. So it could be anything. Let's say you perform very well and you get something like 330, 335. Now you have the freedom to send this particular score to 4 universities free of charge. So it is a very, I would say, desirable thing to find. It is a very desirable thing to send your scores right away, because if you try to send in the future, they will charge $27 a piece. So you will be paying roughly $2,000 to send your GRE scores to one university out later. Saving that money is definitely very desirable. So I would suggest that you do your research prior to giving GRE in order to figure out what university you would like to go to and send scores accordingly. And along with that, GRE works on a slightly different system. I mean, they won't give you the direct name of the university. They have codes for university, and each university has mentioned their own GRE or ETS code on their website. So before going to the exam, I would suggest that you go to the university's website and memorize whatever university code you have. Because I'll give you my own example. When I saw that I received a good score, I thought, okay, I'll send my GRE score to relatively higher in universities, something like UCLA and Stanford. So I could find Stanford within that particular GRE system, but UCLA had a very weird name. It wasn't University of California at Los Angeles or just the short form UCLA. What they had written was, I'll just share it with everybody on the chat here. It was very tricky to find something like this, because who would think to sort of shorten university names in such a manner? So I could not find it, and I had to send my score to another university, which I did not end up using. So it was just a waste of money at the end of it. So to avoid such things, I reiterate, do prior research and find codes for universities. And if you can't remember codes, at least remember what state your university lies in, because the organization in the GRE system is according to state. So if it's UCLA, it will lie within the state of California. If it is, let's say, something like Duke, it will be in Indiana, something like that. Yeah. So before we discuss preparations for the test, I would like to just briefly mention what the perfect score in the context of GRE means. So you might think that 340 out of 340 is brilliant, it's a perfect score, but it's not quite that. You do not need to get 340 out of 340. You can get a lower score and it'll still be just as good, and I'll let you know why. So for most universities, GRE is a bit like an aptitude test or a qualifying criterion, if it makes sense. They test your level of English and math in such a manner that they know you will be able to cope up with whatever they are teaching in their own courses. So if you go to the websites of most high-end, sort of well-reputed colleges, you will find that they provide data for the average GRE scores that their admitted students got over the past few years. And when you look at those scores, you will see that for most universities, their quantitative reasoning scores, especially for engineering and science-oriented branches, are very high. So you need at least a 168 out of 170 in your quantitative reasoning sort of analysis. And apart from that, verbal reasoning is important to make your overall GRE score look respectable. So if you guys are unaware about it, I'll let you know. GRE has a slightly weird scoring system. The adaptive part I mentioned already figures into that. And so what they do is they will grade you out of a range of 130 marks to 170 marks. And uh, when you look at the verbal reasoning scores for most universities, you'll see that the average score for engineers or MS in finance, let's say certain like science-oriented branches, will be in the higher 150s, lower 160s, something like 157 to 162 range. So that is the average score. That's not the highest score or the lowest score that they for the students that they admitted. But you will need a respectable 150, 160 plus score for a admit from a good university, even in your verbal reasoning. But that is still secondary. One of the most important parts of your sort of GRE score will be the quantitative reasoning. And you do not really need to worry too much because quants for GRE especially is very easy compared to what you see in your day-to-day engineering. We'll move on to the preparation part about that, and I'll let you know what I personally recommend about it. Now that you know a bit about the GRE grading system and what sort of score you need to aspire to, you need to achieve at least, we move on to how to prepare for such a score. Now, preparation, as you guys, as a few of you would already know, mostly revolves around verbal reasoning, and even the questions that most of you posted with your registration in the webinar has been surrounding that. How would you prepare for verbal? What sort of words do you recommend we study? So I'll first start with verbal itself, and we can take a look at how to prepare. So firstly, your verbal reasoning section, each section over here will have 20 questions and you will have 30 minutes to complete your entire section. Now, before moving further, I'll just give a quick aside and say that a lot of people who have given GRE along with me or before me have told me that 30 minutes seems to be a pretty like tight boundary to solve 20 verbal questions because a lot of us are not very fast readers or we take time to process the information that is given. So I'll sort of give you a brief time breakup of how to approach the different questions that you see in the verbal reasoning. Now, each verbal reasoning section will have 3 types of questions, and the breakup between those questions is always fixed. So you will have 6 text completion questions. Now, text completion is a simple fill in the blank sort of system where what you will have is a single sentence or up to 2 or 3 sentences together, and they will have up to 3 blanks. It can be either 1, 2, or 3 blanks, but each of these questions has the same weightage. Whether it's 3 blanks or a single blank, each will count for just 1 mark. So keep that in mind when you're solving these questions. And subsequently, along with text completion, you will have something called sentence equivalence. So this is slightly different to text completion. What you will see in this is there'll be 1 or 2 sentences and there'll be just a single blank in those sentences. And within that single blank, you will have to fill in 2 words from the option such that the meaning of the sentence remains the same. If there is any confusion, let me know. Certain people don't quite understand the concept of sentence equivalence without having prepared for it. And yeah, apart from text completion and sentence equivalence, this is the major chunk of verbal reasoning, and that is reading comprehension. So you have anywhere from 1 to 3 or 4 fairly decent sized paragraphs, like around 8 to 10 lines each, and they can be on any random topics. I saw a lot of them which had the elementary portions of certain topics. So something like, let's say, uh, space research or something like that. It won't be very difficult or like impossible to understand, but in various fields they can have certain specific topics and a brief description of those topics. It can be something related to art, it can be about old civilizations and stuff like that. Just interesting tidbits of knowledge, you can call them. And based on that, they will ask a few questions. Generally, you will have up to 4 questions, like one to 4 questions. If it's a very long passage, they will ask 4 questions out of it generally you see either 2 or 3 questions from a single reading comprehension task. And with that sort of combination, they create 10 questions for it. Now that we know the different types of questions, I'll let you know my recommendation for how to divide time between these questions in the actual final exam. So the first two sections that you see here, text completion and sentence equivalence, I would recommend spending not more than 10, at most 12 minutes for it, because these questions tend to be binary. You either know text completion or you do not know the text completion. You can figure out whether you know what goes into that blank or you just don't know it. There's no point in banging your brain and thinking, okay, how can I fill this? How can I fill this? You don't have to waste time. And yeah, the second part of it, comprehension, you can give up to 20 minutes, because when you actually practice, you will realize that a lot of the comprehension questions seem to be ambiguous. The options are structured in such a way that you will think at least 2 or 3 out of the 4 given options are correct. So you need to pay a lot more attention, give a lot more focus on to why a particular option might be correct, why a particular option is 70% correct, but the last 20% part of it is just, yeah, that doesn't make sense. That's not given in the past. You have to practice and figure out, yeah, this is how they trick you in options. They will exaggerate something. They will say most X have done Y when they pass it simply suggested some of the people in X did something like that. So those minor exaggerations, minor details is what you will need to focus on for reading comprehension. So yeah, uh, now that we know what to do within the exam itself, we'll figure out how to prepare for that. So the first part of it is words, and this is a big sticking point for a lot of people. How do I remember words? How many words should I memorize? Where should I memorize the words from? So one important thing that I would like to share is memorize words before you start your practice itself, because a lot of the time what you will see is within your practice sources, the sentences that have been given. For instance, let's say there's a 2 blank text completion sentence, and you will have 4 times to 8 options for that. Out of the 8 options, 5 will be words that you just don't know. You aren't familiar with them. You've never seen them. So that practice sentence itself is a waste for you. You won't be getting anything out of it. You'll just learn that new word and that sentence. You won't be able to figure out whether you understood it correctly, whether you realized, yeah, this word goes here because of this XYZ reason. So I would suggest before you start practicing on actual sentences, memorize a bunch of words uh, uh, through various means, which I will discuss now. So the first, and I would say, like, this is Bible for people who are studying GRE words. Use Bhago's GRE flashcards. I have provided the link for the website. They have also created an app. Now, be careful. There are 2 apps. One is the GRE flashcards app, and another is, if I remember, a vocabulary builder app. So I would recommend using the flashcard app for one very simple reason. The interface is, I would personally say, kind of annoying, but it's unbelievably effective in terms of the fact that you will be seeing a single word so many times that it's impossible for you to not remember it, at least in the short term. So what they have is, wait a second, I'll just let you know. What they have is uh, 3 different tiers, I think 2 tiers rather, that you know the word beforehand, you do not know the word, or you do not know the word. So if you select you knew the word, you won't see it again and again because it doesn't make sense. It is already there in your sort of conscience in a long-term memory. You know that this word means this. But if you do not know it, within your practice session itself, that word will appear to you at least 3 or 4 times, so that at least over the next week or so, you're not going to forget that word. You're going to be like, okay, insipid means tasteless, something like that. If you did not know insipid, yeah, there you go. So it's kind of like a memorize by repetition and drilling into your head sort of a system. A vocabulary builder, what it does is it just gives you a word and 4 options for the meaning of it. It's very easy that way because you're like, yeah, I can solve this question, and you get a bit of confidence out of it. But I personally feel that you do not learn as much as you could have by using something like the vocabulary builder. So I would recommend GRE flashcards, either the app for your mobile phone or the website that the link of which I've posted. And yeah, one more important thing is, like, do not overload yourself. I will repeat this later on also multiple times. Just do not overload yourself, because most of the words that you will see in the GRE flashcards, I would say, even for the common and basic text, like they have 3 different levels of text. Even for the common and basic text, you would not have seen, let's say, 25 to 30 words out of 50 minimum. For a lot of my colleagues, it was a lot more than that as well. So when you try to memorize so many words in a single sitting, it just becomes too much. So I personally never did more than one deck in a single sitting, and most of the times even one deck a day at most, maybe 1.5, not more than that. So apart from this Magoosh GRE flashcards, which is by the way 1,000 words, and that is quite a big number. If you want to, if you've finish this off, and you want another extra source, there's something called Barron's 800 high frequency words. So this has a fair bit of overlap with the GRE flashcards, but there are several new words in that as well. So you can get a broader expanse of words that you look for. So now these GRE flashcards are kind of like a template. Like I would recommend how you treat them is, instead of just memorizing these words, you do an extra step, and whenever you find a new word in the GRE flashcards, you simply Google it. And when you Google it, you will find a bunch of synonyms of that word, and that sort of really expands your vocabulary very quickly. It's an exponential process if it makes sense to you, because you see one new word, you find four different meanings of it, and you realize, okay, out of these four, I've seen this one word beforehand. Other three are new to me, so I'll just record them in some form of I don't know, a repository of some sort. So what I personally did was maintain a Google Doc and regularly update that particular Google Doc. So I'd either whenever I was revising, if I figured, okay, over the last 3 or 4 revisions, I always remembered this particular word. So I would remove it from the doc because I felt, yeah, it's been committed to a long-term memory for me. And whenever I found a new word, I would update it again. So yeah, and the second part that I just mentioned was, yeah, the revision is probably the most important thing in memorizing GRE words because, like I mentioned, 1,000 words, parents are another 800 words. Even if you consider an overlap, you will do at least 1,300 or something like that new words just out of those decks. Apart from that deck, I've already recommended Google, so that will give you another bunch of new. So the only way to commit those words to long-term memory for you guys is going to be very organized in maintaining, okay, these words are, yeah, I've just not been able to remember them over the past week or so. And yeah, I need to revise them. I need to look at them continuously again and again. So yeah, once you are sort of done with a significant amount of words, I won't say study all the words that you can before you start preparation, but study a good amount of words. The thing I recommend to most friends and colleagues is at least finish the common decks and maybe be halfway through the basic decks in the Magoosh flashcards. So that would be around 6 plus 6 common decks and 3 or 4 basic decks. If you are done with, you will have a fair amount of words in your mind to start practice. And again, when you are practicing, you will come across new words, and that will also help. So yeah, and yeah, the recommended sources would be the 5 Pound Manhattan book, which I personally used very extensively during my preparation. I, in fact, finished off all the verbal oriented questions from the Manhattan 5 Pound book. And apart from that, Magoosh. So, Magoosh, I'm pretty sure a lot of you who have looked at least a little bit into GRE preparation would know that Magoosh is a very reliable source for a lot of people who are preparing for GRE. Now, Magoosh accounts tend to be fairly expensive. So I would recommend people to share Magoosh accounts within between each other, like with each other. And your Magoosh account also has adaptive questioning. So we discussed adaptive questioning for GRE. Magoosh, even while preparations, will give you an adaptive experience. So let's say you are just randomly practicing verbal question and you got your previous 5 sentence-based questions correct. So the sixth, seventh, and eighth questions that Magoosh gives you will be relatively on the more difficult side. So that they give you an actual challenge and you realize, okay, this is something that I need to learn. These kinds of questions I'm struggling. So what I would say is, while sharing your Magoosh accounts, make sure that it's a staggered form of sharing. When I say staggered, what I mean is if two people are sharing, one is giving the exam, let's say in May, and the second person is giving the exam somewhere in July or August. So that you don't interfere with each other's preparation. You don't corrupt the adaptive nature, which is very helpful in a Magoosh account. Does that make sense to all of you? So now that we're done with verbal, I'll briefly describe preparation for quantitative reasoning. Now, whoever has seen any sort of questions for quantitative reasoning from GRE will know that this is probably the easiest section that you're going to get. Like I personally explain it to most friends of mine as like 8th or 9th standard level math that you will sort of reminisce, okay, I did this in school and I enjoyed doing it or I hated doing it. Either it's So yeah, I'll just quickly tell you what the pattern of the quantitative reasoning section is. You will have 20 questions, and instead of 30 minutes for verbal, you get 35 minutes for quants, which is frankly, in my opinion, a big waste. But yeah, so like I mentioned, you won't have to prepare too much. You will just see that there are a huge variety, like a vast array of topics. You will have something from algebra, something from the very basics of functions and how they work, something from coordinate geometry, something from simple geometry like circles, triangles, squares. You will have mensuration, area, perimeter, and all that. You will have the unitary method. I think I saw quite a few questions. Like if 4 people can do the work in 5 days, how many days will it take 7 people? Something like very basic questions that you did in school level. And yeah, the one thing that I recommend for quants is don't do much theory beforehand. Don't try to see, okay, I have mensuration as a topic, for example. So what sort of formula do I need to know in mensuration? Take the opposite approach. Like try solving mensuration based questions. And if you don't remember certain formula, let's say the area of a parallelogram, a lot of people here might not remember it. So if you come across a question that involved area of parallelogram and you could not solve it, then look at the formula for it. You will end up preparing enough for quantitative reasoning in this manner is what I think. Because you are anyway going to end up giving a lot of mock tests and you'll realize, okay, these particular sections I could not do. Now, another thing that I mentioned right now, make sure you are familiar with all topics that are a part of quantitative reasoning. One particular issue that I faced was this, like there were a few questions based on very elementary statistics, but they had certain terminology like quartiles and I think the first quartile and third quartile. I still don't remember what they are, but during the GRE exam, just before the GRE exam, I looked at the formula for it so that I do not mess up on such questions. And like we discussed earlier on quants, while being the easiest part of the GRE exam is also the most important. So like, I won't say devote a lot of time to quantitative reasoning preparation, but devote enough time that you are getting at least 168. And like based on the average GRE scoring, what you will see is 168 means you can't get more than 2 questions wrong in both sections combined. So 20-20 questions, it can be 19-19, 18-20, something like that, and you will get a 168 or a 167 score minimum. That won't hurt you. But just make sure you don't make silly mistakes. So I am relatively blessed with quick mental math. So what I used to do was, at least on the day of the exam, what I did was I solved all 20 quant questions and I solved them once again because I had that much time. I'm pretty sure most of you won't have that amount of time, but still, you will have more than enough time to solve all the questions one and revise them once again, if not solve them from scratch again. So just do that much and make sure you don't mess up on the day of the exam when you're giving quants. That's and yeah, one final note is there will be an on-screen calculator for you guys to use. Do not use it because it has one of the most inconvenient interfaces. It will just take up time. And most of the times you will want to use the on-screen calculator to do certain complicated calculations, something like a 3-digit number by a 4-digit number or something like that. You would think it might save time. But a lot of the times what will end up happening is that the particular numbers that you're trying to multiply will end up being out of range for the on-screen calculator. It's not like the scientific calculators we use during our engineering. It doesn't have a big like e to the power whatever x, y, z. It's a small ranged calculator, and it's intended to be that way. Like when they are asking you to multiply such big numbers, they don't want you to multiply them in their entirety. There is some trick to the question. So try to identify that instead of thinking, okay, I have a calculator, I'll use it. All right. So any questions about quantitative reasoning? Okay, so you were asking about the list of books for Virgil. There are other sources, but see, if I remember correctly, Magoosh account has something close to 1,000 questions for Verbal. Magoosh itself, the account has around 1,000 questions for Verbal, and the Manhattan books have, I would say, I think 80 or 90 questions, 80 or 90 comprehension passages, and apart from that, something like 150 to 200 questions in both text completion and sentence improvements. It might seem like a small thing, but these are a good number of questions. And apart from that, I refer to a book called Princeton Review. I'll just mention it. This one was specifically for sentence-based questions because comprehensions, let's face it, get a bit boring after a while. So I did not practice comprehension that much. that much. But for sentences, I also refer to Princeton Review. And yeah, you are asking for materials for quant. Again, Magoosh and 5 pound book work. So when you look at the questions from the 5 pound book, you will realize what I'm saying when I say that quants is basically school level math. You won't struggle too much with it. They have divided the questions based on topics, like I just said, and each topic you will almost definitely be able to solve each question within a minute, minute and a half at most. And they will move enough. You won't have to practice as much for quant as for and yeah, practice tests I'm getting to. Don't worry. So after quants, we'll quickly discuss analytical writing. Yeah, for analytical writing, it will turn up at the very start of your test, like I mentioned, and it will be a 1 hour section. Within that 1 hour, you will have 2 questions which you can give 30 minutes each to. So I think you start off with the analyze an issue task, and after that, you will do the analyze an argument task. So yeah, like I mentioned, analyze an issue is something not exactly topical, but something that a lot of you have discussed in some manner in passing. So let's say government funding for the arts. You don't discuss that generally, but there is a discussion that yeah, government should not interfere with arts and stuff like that. So uh, analyze an issue will cover those kinds of topics, which we used to see in school in the form of argumentative essays. So yeah, and the analyze and argument task is slightly different. They will give you a short passage, and within that short passage, they will make the case for something. What they will do is they will give a few not anecdotes. They will give a few sentences, make a few statements, and they will say that based on these statements, we have concluded that X, Y, Z is happening. And now what will happen is those statements in itself might be correct, but they have been used to create a relatively false conclusion. So I'll give you a very simple example. I can say that uh, ever since the new teacher joined the college, the grades of students have been going down. Hence, he is a bad teacher and he should be removed. Now, when you look at this example at face value, when you look at it from afar, it seems like, yeah, it's a reasonable assumption. But when you give it a bit more of critical thought, when you give a more analytical eye to it, what you will realize is that the teacher coming and the grades changing do not necessarily mean it's because of bad teaching. There can be multiple other factors. The exam pattern might have changed. The questions for the exam might have become more difficult. You can have multiple sort of flawed assumptions being made to come to the conclusion that bad grades equals bad teacher. There can be several other factors, and analyze an argument wants you to do that. They want you to think critically about the argument they have given and find out what assumptions have been made, or how this argument is flawed and what would have to be corrected, what extra resources would you have to get. So for instance, over here, to decide whether a teacher is good or bad, the simplest thing that you can do is get a survey from the students. So okay, if you have 50 students, out of that 35 are saying, okay, this instructor is good, he's making us learn even though our grades are bad, you don't need to remove the teacher. There's a slightly different issue. So yeah, that's an example. And unless an argument might seem a bit new to you guys, but once you start practicing, you'll realize that it's not as difficult as it appears. And yeah, speaking about topics, you'll be able to find an exhaustive. Exhaustive means all possible topics for analyze an issue as well as analyze an argument on the ETS website. I'm attaching links to both of them over here. So when I say this list is exhaustive, it's exhaustive, but it's like incredibly long. You will never be able to cover all these topics. If I remember correctly, there are 150 topics each for issue and argument. But you at least have all the possible topics that you can face in the exam. So what I recommend for AWA in general is that you should prepare as much as you can before the day of the exam. So now as much as you can does not mean you start looking at all these 150 essay topics and start writing them down one by one. That's never going to happen. It's not possible. So look at for issue, what I recommend is you guys look at topics and figure out whether you can give an answer to them in a reasonable manner. So you guys know the pattern we follow in argumentative essays in school generally, right? If there's an introduction, there's one point, there's another point, there's a few examples, and then there's a conclusion. So look at issue topics and figure out whether you can do something about it, whether this topic is making sense to you and how you will approach writing an essay. If I'm being relatively more technical, create an outline for the issue essay before the exam if possible. You won't be able to do it for all topics, but I think I personally did created an outline for around 20 or 25 issue topics before I went for the exam. And I was lucky enough to find an essay which I had already discussed with a friend, and I created an argument, created an outline for it, and it really helped me. Because when I say a 30-minute issue essay, the 30 minutes part becomes a crunch. Just like verbal, even for essay writing, 30 minutes is just about enough time, but you will have to be quick. So the early preparation part helps you out because you don't have to think as much. It just becomes about how fast you can type and how well you can create your argument around the argument. So yeah. And one more thing, since I mentioned that the 30 minutes is a hindrance, it's a very good idea to practice writing essays. And when I say write, I mean type, because in the exam also you're going to type it out onto the screen. Now, speaking about typing, you should be aware that the editor or the sort of platform that ETS gives you is very bare bones. It will not correct any grammatical errors, it will not correct any spelling errors. So while practicing, you should again use a text editor which does not correct spelling errors for you, so that you figure out, okay, yeah, these XYZ words were what I typed incorrectly, and I need to learn the spellings of them, for instance. Now, the checking of the essays is done in a slightly unusual manner. What they do is they get it corrected twice, once by a human moderator and once by an AI-based moderator. And the scores are average. Why I'm telling you this? Because spelling errors will add up for you guys. So ETS on their own website mentions that certain typing errors are accepted because they understand this is not a well-reviewed thing. It is a first draft that's been made in 30 minutes. But if you type, let's say, receive 5 times in your essay, and each time you have done RECIEVE, it will realize that that's not a typing error, that's a spelling error, and it will reduce marks for you. So make sure you are using words that you 100% know the meaning to, and make sure you are spelling them correctly. And yeah, for that, practice is important. And for practicing, use such a text editor that will make you understand, okay, yeah, these things I'm making a mistake over here quite frequently. So yeah, after the text editor portion, what I mentioned was discussing topics with friends. So yeah, the analyze an issue topic is especially important for this, in my opinion, because I used to struggle a bit more with that. So what I would do is just pick a topic, call up a friend, and we would discuss multiple topics within the same call. So it doesn't have to be a boring thing. You're essentially chit chatting with a friend while also doing something productive. This is particularly useful for people who have work and who are busy, because I can understand that preparing for GRE after an 8-9 hour day work or day of work becomes pretty annoying. But you can look at it as speaking to a friend, which is a bit more entertaining. And yeah, lastly, your size matters. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. The size of your essay is very important. I would recommend something that is at least 400 words, but don't try to extend it to 400 words by going round and round and speaking about the same topic for, I don't know, 150, 200 words. Like, if you don't have anything relevant, don't bother about the size, let it be a short essay. But just sort of dawdling and speaking about the same topic in a very elaborate and not necessary manner will reduce your score. So try to make it as long as possible. Try to have as many relevant points as you can, but do not increase the size based at the cost of quality, because that will lead to lower marks in fact. So just take care of that. Okay, after analytical writing, yeah, one more point. So when you look at the pool of topics that I've pasted over here, you will see that there are slight nuances, slight differences in each topic. So for instance, for issue, what you will see is they will either ask you to just state your point, like whether you are for or against the statement that they've given, or what they can do is make slight nuances. They can say, okay, if you are for, let us know what you think is the strongest argument that can be made by the against camp, and how will you refute that sort of claim. Or they can just simply say, give the best example you can think of for your in favor of your argument. So look at those particular nuances and make sure you address them, because they want to know whether you can answer the question properly. And making your point or stating your argument is one aspect, but you need to answer the question that they've asked. So just make sure you've done that part. Timelines for preparation. So I'll start off by describing how I prepared, and then I will give a brief description of a. Okay, wait, No, Ask 800 words, no, not 800 words in 30 minutes. You have to write on around 350 to 400 word essay. I would recommend slightly over 400 words in 30 minutes. So you will have 30 minutes for the analyze and issue task and 30 minutes for the analyze and argument task, two separate tasks. And yeah, analytical writing compared to the other sections. So I would say in terms of scores, quants is the most important. After that, verbal and analytical writing have relatively equal importance because certain universities have a minimum sort of score that they want for analytical writing. So for instance, I remember Georgia Tech on their website has specified that you need a minimum of 4 out of 6 because what AWA is basically testing you for is whether you can read a statement and make a coherent argument about it. It's testing whether you have the capability of writing well enough. And I see that a few guys are DMing me. Don't do that. You can just send a message to everybody in the chat. And okay, for mock test papers, I'll let you guys know. But again, Magoosh provides you a fair few mock tests. I think they have unlimited mock tests, in fact. So what they do is, out of their pool of questions that they've compiled, they create a mock test, and you can give that mock test on Magoosh. And apart from that, as somebody else mentioned in the chats, ETS provides 2 mock tests for free. So I would recommend everybody to give those mock tests without fail. Now, within my timeline, I'll discuss how many mock tests to give and when to give them. So we'll get that. And somebody asked me how many words I learned in total. So I can't give you an exact figure because, like I mentioned, I would Google and that would just lead me to a larger larger sort of set of words to study. But within the Magoosh and the Barron's portion, I would say I did around 850 words, which is like 17 texts from the Magoosh part. I completed all the common and basic texts, and from the advanced text, I think I not completed the last 1 or 2 texts, at most 3. And apart from that, I also studied the Barron's deck, and I did not finish that off. There were 800 words in that. I think I'd done around 300, 350. And like I said, don't take this as a hard figure that okay, but like Dhruv did 1,000 or 1,500 words, I can do that much and be done with it. Like I mentioned, Google sort of expanded my word set by a lot, and I could not count that because obviously I couldn't. So like make sure you follow that. Like, create a repository of words of your own where you have new words and words that you're relatively unfamiliar with. And as soon as you become more and more familiar, update that deck. Like you found a new word after a week, maybe 2 weeks. Now you know that word pretty well. So you don't need to have it. You don't need to revise it again and again. It'll just be a increase in time for your preparation. So if it makes sense, have a rotating set of words that you are regularly studying and revising. Okay, so now moving on to my timeline. Yeah, it's so like Shreya mentioned, I gave my GRE in June of 2019, towards the end of June 2019, and that was basically a part of my summer vacation for my 3rd year. So what happened was my exams finished, let's say around May 15th. I relaxed and chilled out at home for a week. And then the next 40 days was extensive GRE prep, and I did not have much else productive to do. So yeah, like I mentioned, brief vacation or even a lull in your academics. So for instance, final year students, after their placement, it's possible that you are not very busy with coursework and you might have to work on your project, but apart from that, you have a fair amount of free time in your day. So you can give this exam within that sort of time frame as well. Now, I personally prepared for around 40 days, but uh, I am a bit better at retaining words as compared to the average person. So I have sort of expanded the timeline for people who might be a bit slower with learning new words and stuff like that. So if you're doing it in a relatively casual manner, you can finish it off within 2 months. If you have a bit more of a time constraint, you can do within 35 to 40 days as well. So how I would recommend you go about doing that is you start off with your verbal vocabulary preparation. And if you want to be quick with it and you don't have that much time, along with your word preparation, because like I mentioned, you won't be able to do, more than 60, 65, at most 70 words within a day. So that is like a 2 hour, 2.5 hour commitment at most. If you want to give a bit more time to GRE preparation within your day, you can start with your analytical writing portion. or you can prepare quants if you're just feeling bored and you're like, okay, I can put in some more time, but I don't want to do something heavy like AW and writing essays. So along with the initial word learning phase, you can do something else like quants or AWS. And subsequently, once you are done with the common and basic text, like I mentioned earlier on, you can start off with your 5 LB Manhattan practice, or you can, if you have a Magoosh account already, you can start off with your Magoosh practices. So now, uh, again, if you are giving a test during a vacation, schedule it for the latter part. For instance, if you have, let's say, 30 days free during a winter vacation after your first term exams are done, you can schedule it towards the start of January. The first week is anyway most of the times pretty chill. You don't have to study too much for that part. So you can do your GRE preparation within that, I don't know, 35 day part, day time frame, and you can give it at the end, give your exam at the end. And yeah, the time splits of preparation are pretty clear based on what I've explained so far. I guess I won't elaborate too much on that. And yeah, the mock test part that a lot of people are discussing, are asking me about. You should give, I personally myself gave 5 mock tests in total. And I would recommend all of you to give at least 4 to 5 mock tests, irrespective of how much time you have. Even if you are preparing for a month while you are doing a job, mock tests will give you the best idea of how well you're going to perform in GI. And for the sources of mock test, I've already mentioned Magoosh as well as EPS. And the 5 pound book also has, I think, a couple of mock tests in it. I personally did not give that, but considering the quality of individual questions in the 5 pound book, I would say that the mock test would also be good. You can give that as well. And yeah, the sources like I mentioned, and when to give mock tests. A few people will tell you that okay, at the start of your GRE preparation, give a mock test to figure out where you are. But it is my personal belief that before preparing vocabulary, it is very unlikely that you will have the required skill set to give a good verbal mock test. Quantitative reasoning, you can practice and give the test in some manner and figure out, okay, I can get XYZ score in quants. But verbal, it will end up leading to a waste of your mock if you are giving without any kind of preparation. There are a few of you who will be very strong literary enthusiasts for whom giving a mock at the start of your preparation might make sense. But in general, I don't recommend it personally. You can instead practice regularly. So I would recommend time to practices for verbal. So if you are practicing sentences, let's say, we already discussed that you need to solve about 10 sentences in 10 minutes. So practice accordingly. If you have solved 20 sentences, then you should be able to finish it within 20 minutes, at most 22 or 23, no more than that. If you are practicing reading comprehensions, for instance, then give 2 minutes per question in total. So if you solve 3 comprehensions which have 9 questions in total, then you should be able to do it within 18 minutes, at most 20, no more than that. You guys understand what I'm trying to say? And yeah, while doing this practice, once you get a satisfactory score on a regular basis, so let's say you are aiming for 160 in verbal, that means you should be able to get around 15 or 16 out of 20 questions correct on a regular basis. So once you are averaging something like that, you can give a mock and figure out, okay, within the pressure situation, within an exam, how well am I performing? And if I'm not performing well, where am I going wrong? So that makes sense. I'll move on to a tentative timeline for people who are working. I spoke to a few friends of mine who gave GRE while they were a bit busy, and how they sort of juggled work and preparation. So one of the first things that all of them told me is, after work, just try your best to give around an hour and a half for studying words. So like I mentioned, you should not do more than 50 words a day, or at most 60, 70. So that much can be done within an hour and a half, even if you are slightly distracted and just exhausted because of work. But another important thing that they told me is not to be too hard on yourself. By like, don't set unreasonable targets for yourself, because all that will lead to is discouragement and sort of disheartening at the end of the day. You will be like, I have XYZ amount of backlog, I just can't do it anymore. Instead of that, set reasonable targets for yourself, be realistic with how much you'll be able to prepare. If you are experiencing very busy weeks in work, then don't try to give an hour and a half every day. Think about doing something like hour and a half every 2 days. Like I will do, let's say 150 or 200 words this week, as opposed to like an entire 5 or 6 decks within the week. And just try to be more reasonable with yourself so that you don't discourage yourself too much about preparation. So yeah, and after another thing that they told me was not to be very early with booking your exam date, but don't dilly dally on it as well. Like don't think that I'm not prepared at all. There's no sense in booking your date, because this is one of the most important things that I realized, and even my friends realized, that if you have an actual exam date to look to, you will automatically start preparing. You will automatically be a bit more sort of upbeat, and you will take a bit more initiative about it. So once you've done a fair amount of words beforehand, uh, like I mentioned earlier, common and basic texts, you can pick a GRE exam date, let's say a month and a half in the future. And since you've done a lot of words, most of your time will then go into practicing. You will either do regular practices with Magoosh, or you will pick a topic and start doing something on the 5 pound. So, and when you are practicing that particular looming deadline, okay, my exam is coming in, I don't know, 4 weeks, 3 weeks, it will become a bigger motivator for you guys. And so again, you might not be able to give as much time on weekdays. Weekends will be your biggest sort of source of preparation. Most of my friends would, I don't know, give 3.5 hours, maybe 4 hours a day on their weekends for GRE when the exam was relatively close. And yeah, if you have that luxury, if you have the capability, you can sort of hold up a few leaves, and since your GRE score is going to be fairly important, you can sort of tactically place your leaves in such a way that you have 3, 4, maybe 5 days at a time to prepare. For instance, this kind of a weekend, you will have a Monday that is a holiday. So if you can take a Friday off or a Tuesday off, you will get 4 days at a time to prepare. And I think we all agree that a bit of rhythm while you are preparing for anything proves to be very helpful. So if possible, try to create as many 3, 4 day weekends as possible, and you can help yourself in preparation. And yeah, one final thing, your Magoosh account will come with a time oriented, like it won't be valid for a long period of time. It will have, I think, a 3 month or a 6 month validity. I'm not very sure. So if you are not sure that you want to give your exam, don't purchase your Magoosh account. It'll just go to waste. You'll waste your money. Once you are very certain that, okay, next year I want to go for masters, or I want to give my GRE within the next 5 months, 6 month period, then you can decide to purchase a Magoosh account and find somebody you want to share it. All right, so we'll move on. Now, yeah, TOEFL. So GRE, at least for a lot of people, a lot of colleges during this pandemic has become optional, but TOEFL is going to be a mandatory thing for everybody. It's basically a foreign university's way of testing whether you are proficient enough in English, whether you'll be able to handle the coursework that they are going to conduct in the language that they're going to conduct it in, which is going to be English. So what happens is, most of the times TOEFL is a pretty easy test. You don't have to worry too much, and you only need to clear a basic cutoff that has been given by university. So for most universities, even the higher end universities, TOEFL cutoffs will be somewhere in the range of early 90s to early 80s to early 90s, no more than that. And they will have a section wise cutoff of 20, maybe 18, 19 marks each. So you and all these are figures are out of 30. So you will have 4 sections. Each section will be graded out of 30 marks. And it is, I'm telling you genuinely, believe me, it's a very easy test. Your reading section is basically the reading comprehension part of GRE, but at a very, very easy scale compared to that. And yeah, apart from that, you have listening, where you will listen to either a lecture or a conversation, and after you listen to them, you will be given a few questions. Speaking will have 4 tasks in total. One will be independent. The other 3 will be integrated. When I say integrated, what I mean is you will either read something and then you will have to speak about it, or you will be listening to a conversation and you will have to be speaking about something that was described in that conversation. And finally, you will have a writing task, which is again a much more easier and chiller version of the writing task that you will do for GRE. It will be again an analyze an issue kind of essay, but of a much easier caliber. And you will have either a lecture or a passage that you've been given, and based on that, you will have to sort of write a summary or something like that. And yeah, so TOEFL changes its exam pattern not very infrequently. I think last year or two ago only they changed the speaking task a little bit, and I think even the listening task that reduced the length of those tasks a little bit. So refer to the TOEFL website before you are giving the exam. And yeah, one thing that I've forgotten to tell you guys is GRE score holds a very long validity. It's valid for 5 years after you've given the exam, but TOEFL score is not valid for as long. I'm so sorry. TOEFL score has a validity of only 2 years. So only give TOEFL when you are fairly sure that you will be going for your master's or higher studies soon. And yeah, this is the official TOEFL website for studying. And the speaking and writing tasks have specific templates which you can use to create your answers, and you can find those on this particular YouTube website. I won't be going into details because TOEFL does not deserve as much time as a lot of people give it. So just don't worry, you will be able to find these templates, and I'll just mention quickly what's important to practice for TOEFL and how much time you will need. So even 2 weeks, when I'm saying, I'm being generous. A lot of people told me that after GRE preparation, you won't need to prepare for TOEFL for more than 1 week, 1.5 weeks. And most of the time within that 1.5 2 weeks span is going to go for speaking, because that is a completely new thing for a lot of people, and a lot of people struggle in getting across their point while they are speaking. So you need to practice. You have the templates that I mentioned beforehand. Just record yourself while practicing and revisit whatever you've spoken, so that you realize, okay, I'm stuttering here, or this particular point did not make sense. This sentence was not grammatically correct. I need to rectify this. And one more important thing is speaking tasks are always timed. You will have either a 30-second, 45-second, or 1 minute span for which you have to speak. Uh, and you cannot exceed that time. You cannot be under that time. If you're under that time, you will obviously be penalized. If you exceed that time, you won't be able to conclude your points very clearly. So whenever you're speaking, just make sure that you are keeping track of time. Within the exam itself, there will be a big timer on the screen that you'll be able to see while you're speaking. So you will realize, okay, I'm going too slow or I'm going too fast. I need to adjust my pace. So just make sure you practice speaking enough. And yeah, recording the responses on your phone is not too difficult. It's pretty convenient. And for listening, one thing that I found to be important, at least on a personal basis, was note making, because I tend to have a wavering attention span while I'm listening to things that don't particularly interest me. So just make sure that you take a pen and paper and make regular notes while you're practicing listening tasks. And for sources of practice, I'll just quickly mention a YouTube channel that I personally use. So they have videos of sorts. You can simply pause the video when you have the entire reading comprehension. Or for instance, if you're listening, after listening, there will be a running sort of line of questions based on whatever conversation or lecture you're listening to. So if you think that the video is going too fast, just pause it and look at whatever options you have and select, and you can like practicing for TOEFL is not a big hassle. You won't even have to practice for too much of time. So just don't worry too much about it. I'll quickly take questions about TOEFL later on. Right now, I'll just let you know certain important things for your exam day. So passports. Even before your day of the exam, for applying for TOEFL and GRE, you need to have valid passports which have not expired. So just make sure you have the passport. Otherwise, your GRE exam will be a big waste, and it's a fairly costly thing. Like a GRE exam costs $200 a pop, and TOEFL exams cost $180. So just make sure. And apart from that, you don't need to carry any stationery. They will give you paper and pencils in the exam center. If you are somebody who is regularly thirsty, only transparent water bottles will do. No sort of tags like the Aquafina bottles or something like that that you get for sale. They have those blue tags and stuff like that. So that won't do. You'll have to either remove that or use a different one. And another thing is the centers tend to be slightly on the colder side. They are temperature regulated, but the temperature that they keep is relatively colder. So wear something warm like a sweatshirt, or you can carry a hoodie. And yeah, for TOEFL, reaching early is a big deal, because what they do is it's kind of like a staggered system. They will take 5 students, 10 students, and they'll start admitting them into the center. And their exams will start while you might still be waiting outside. So what happens is their reading section is done while you and they have started their listening section. Now when you start your listening section, they moved on to the speaking section. So it might lead to a bit of disturbance. You're listening to a lecture while in the background somebody else is giving their speaking answer. So it's better to be ahead of the curve rather than beyond. So reach as early to the TOEFL center as you can. Even for GRE, reaching a bit early will never hurt, obviously. Yeah, Dhwani, they give paper and pen. You are not allowed to carry your own paper, but they will give enough rough papers and pencils if for instance, your pencil cut tip broke. They won't say no to giving another pencil. Like that, you don't need to worry too much about that. They will provide enough stationery for everything. Should TOEFL be given first or GRE? I personally recommend GRE first because preparing for vocabulary for GRE and doing reading comprehensions for that sort of gives you a pretty high level of preparation for TOEFL even before you are giving the exam. So once you've given GRE, TOEFL will feel like a piece of cake, and I'm very sure about it. And yeah, so one last thing for TOEFL, there will be a brief pause between sections. So once you are done with all your listening questions, there will be a 1.5 minute pause before they start your speaking section. So you can utilize that pause to write down the speaking templates that we discussed in the previous slide quickly onto your paper so that you have something to look at while you're speaking and you are not sort of flustered because you have to speak something entirely from memory. So just some small tips to do better in your TOEFL exam. And one thing that I forgot to mention in the previous slide is that speaking scores are important for universities because they are used a lot of times to decide whether you are eligible for TA-ship or not, or teaching assistantship, which pays and it also reduces your overall course fees by a fair bit. So make sure you get a good score in TOEFL speaking, if not in the other section. And yeah, finally, I will take individual queries from people, but before that, I would just like to tell you all that this was a brief seminar about the overall methods of preparation that I did. What we had in mind as of now was I can conduct 5 sessions which cover with a 5 session for groups of 10 or at most 12 people each, which would cover various topics within verbal reasoning and analytical writing analysis and even quantitative reasoning. With examples, and I'll sort of explain how I approached solving questions and what kind of tricks or sort of data-based I don't know indicators would I use to sort of get the relevant information that would lead me to my final answer in several questions. So, like I mentioned already, for comprehension-based questions, okay, certain portions of your passage will be important to be able to answer any question correctly. So, how to pick up on those cues within the comprehensions or within text completion questions, how to figure out what information within the previous sentences was relevant, so that you can fill in this upcoming blank that you're seeing. So, I was thinking we can do something like a bunch of examples which I will solve in front of people, and I'll ask them to solve as well so that they can figure out how to approach such questions. And apart from such a sort of group-based system, we can also have an additional individual mentorship where I can correct up to 6 essays given by people for AWA because I've found out based on what my colleagues would tell me that a lot of people cannot find qualified people who will evaluate their AWS so that they get an idea of where they are going wrong, how to improve on their essays. So I can do that for a few people, and along with that, since most people are going to be giving GRE in order to pursue masters, I can also review SOPs for them. Now, this comes from a personal experience and not necessarily exactly a personal experience, but an experience that a lot of people have told me about, that counseling and sort of overall programs for master's applications tend to not give very ideal SOPs. They write your SOP, but a lot of people are not satisfied at the end of the day by what they've written. So I personally believe that an SOP is something that you yourself have to write. Nobody else can write it for you because at the end of the day, it's your journey about why you want to pursue masters or how you got to the point that you are at currently. So what I recommend is you guys can write your SOPs and I can give my own opinion and my review on it, how I would suggest you can improve it, how to make it better, how to sort of change certain things in order to give a more refined look to it. So we were thinking of these two tiers. The first one that I mentioned was for groups of up to 10 to 12. We will conduct sessions. We will conduct 5 sessions, which give you my personal tips and tricks on how to approach individual questions. And I will try to find and solve as many difficult questions for you guys as I can so that you know how to approach them. And for this tier, we are currently planning on charging 14.99 per person. And for the second tier that I mentioned, where we would correct AWSs and give you a reasonable evaluation and how to improve them and how much you will score based on the essay you have written, along with an additional uh, review of your SOPs, we were planning on charging 24.99. And along with these things, I will also provide certain resources of my own. So, for instance, AWA essays that I had written during my preparation, or the repository of words that I kept mentioning during my lecture, which is, I still personally believe, very important. So, I'll give you guys my own repository of words, which, while it would be good reference for you, I would still recommend all of you all to create your own at the end of it. So, I guess that's it for today. Thank you guys for attending. I hope I helped you.
Thank you, Dhruv. The session was extremely helpful and informative, and I'm sure our mentees have a lot of takeaways from today's session. On that note, I think we can conclude the session. Thank you again, Dhruva. It's great to have you onboarded as a mentor.